Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Wyan, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Applied Software Great Tech Group. You're invited to join our conversation to model the future of construction innovation and the digital transformation adventure of this great industry. My guest today is Major General Karl Horst. General Horst retired from the United States Army in 2013 after more than 37 years of enlisted and commissioned service. During that time, he had the privilege to lead soldiers at every level of the military, at home and around the world, in peacetime and in combat. Upon retirement, he founded KNHorst and Associates, LLC, that provides consulting support to clients interested in reinforcing ethical behavior and strong positive leadership attributes. Welcome to the show, General Horst.
Well, thanks, Todd. It's good to see you again, and I'm thrilled that we get an opportunity to do this together.
Yeah, likewise. So you were the keynote during last year's MEP Force conference, and how does a retired Major General get roped into the world of construction technology?
I have friends that have a penchant for getting me into trouble, and
there you go.
they knew that the MEP Force was meeting in San Antonio. The theme was "Stronger Together." And we were talking about leadership, and they said, you'd probably be a good fit to go to San Antonio and spend some time with those folks.
Yeah. And I got to say, having the backdrop to the Alamo was pretty cool during one of your talks, one of many talks during the conference, but that was awesome.
Yeah, we did the evening welcome there at the Alamo, brought everybody over to the historic Alamo. And I thought it was a very, very nice venue. I thought the entire program was very well put together, and it was a real honor and privilege for me to be able to participate and be part of it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's dive into leadership. It's one of my favorite topics, and there's a lot to unpack there for sure. But let's kind of define terms first. What does good leadership really look like to you in this ever-changing environment of today?
Good leadership. I've often said that I've asked a rhetorical question: why is good leadership decisive to good business? And I said, if you recall from my pitch, I said, good leadership is a glue that holds the organization together. And so, can you really put your finger on leadership? No, you can see the byproducts of good leadership. When you see an organization that functions very well, is hitting on all cylinders, that has a very strong culture, a good team approach to doing things, a synergy that exists within the team, a team that communicates with one another and has high standards, high expectations, and high output. Those are all the manifestations of good leadership. And so I look at the entire organization, and you can do a dipstick test on them by looking at those things and determine whether there's good leadership in place or there's leadership that needs additional assistance, additional focus. But good leadership is decisive to good business. And I think it's an imperative. I think leadership is an imperative to success.
Mm-hmm. What should the goal of good leadership be for a business?
Well, the role of the leader, if you look at an organization and you look at the welfare of an organization, if you look at the culture of the organization, those are all the responsibilities of the leader or the leaders. And so a strong, vibrant, successful organization has got strong, vibrant, innovative leaders that are driving that. And people want to be part of those kinds of organizations. They sense good leadership, but at the same time, they can detect poor leadership as well. Mm-hmm. And so again, it goes to the culture and the viability of an organization. And where you have a very highly successful organization, you'll find a very strong culture, and you'll find very strong leaders. I mean, you can look at sports, you can look at business. Where there is culture, where there is a strong team, there is also strong leaders driving that.
Yeah. So one of the interesting dynamics at play here in the construction industry is there's a whole lot of silos that pop up, whether it's by function. So the GC is a silo from the subcontractor, which is a silo from the architect, and they only kind of give each other the bare minimum legal requirements of their contracts, and maybe they don't even like each other all the time, or they're kind of built in this us versus them mentality. How does a good leader
Mm-hmm.
step into that kind of adversarial environment and create that collaboration?
Well, your use of the term silos is very descriptive, and it's actually one of the things that we in leadership look at in terms of inhibitors of a good organization. Is when you have silos where people operate. So a lot of times people look at leadership on a vertical axis, north and south.
Mm-hmm.
Communications from the top down, from the bottom up. But the real key to success, Todd, particularly when you get into a diverse organization, as we had there at MEP Force, is horizontal integration across the silos. You've got to horizontally integrate each of those centers, each of those key contributors to the organization, key contributors to the mission. That's the function of the leader, is to create that horizontal integration between those silos. I use as an example the Goldwater-Nichols Act of 1986. There was a time in our military when we all lived within our own silos. I lived in the Army silo. My Air Force compadres lived in their Air Force silo, Navy in their silo, and Marine Corps in their own silo. And so one of the things as we looked at the operation in 1983, Urgent Fury into Grenada, what we found is we had too many silos, and our silos didn't communicate with each other. And what the Congress said was, we've got to do a better job of that. And what they did is they created the Goldwater-Nichols Act, which forced all of us out of our silos and to horizontally integrate with the other silos and get comfortable being in other people's silos. And so if you look at from 1983, Goldwater-Nichols 1986 to the invasion of Panama in 1989, what you found was Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines coming together in a constructive way, breaking out of their silos instead of hiding in their silos, putting their arms around each other, and leveraging the pieces, parts, if you will, from each silo to create synergy amongst the services, what we call joint operations, to really, really bring home what we needed to do. So we did it first in 1989. It occurred again in 1990, 1991, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. And it really came to a crescendo with the 100-hour war, when the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines of the United States were able to vanquish the fourth largest army in the world in less than 100 hours. Those are examples of horizontal integration, creating synergy amongst the silos for an outcome that was very, very successful. That, if that's a good example, kind of lays out for you how that worked at a macro level with the services. You can take that into business. You can take it and look at silos and do the same thing. It's a cross-fertilization. It's communication. It's knowing what exists in the other silos and how to leverage those to create synergy to accomplish your mission.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So if I can maybe rephrase it,
Yep.
You can let me know if this is fair. Is good leadership really pushes people kind of outside of their comfort zones to collaborate effectively, and they set the parameters and the frame of the boundaries, if you will, how far you can go, but nudge you outside that comfort zone, because that's where the growth is really going to happen there.
Yep. And so if you take it if you take it from the military standpoint, put it into business. So as an Army guy, we had to get real comfortable describing equipment capabilities of the Air Force, of the Navy, of the Marines. Likewise, they had to do the same. And so having that understanding, translate that to business. If you go into MEP Force, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbers, the fact that they've got to create synergy with what they're doing to be successful in their respective businesses. It causes them to have to understand, appreciate, respect, and work with others that are different from them within their professional skill sets.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer in you got to wear the company jersey first,
Yeah,
so to speak,
yeah,
before you go into your function. And I think
yep,
a lot of times the heartache comes, and the people have that backwards. They come in with their limited view, and that's the jersey that they're going to wear instead of seeing the bigger picture. Because what might be better for the company may not be totally good for my function, but it's what's good for the company. So in the long run, it's what's good for my function. But that's a humility that
yeah.
is
Well, it's
required there.
yeah, yeah, and people get real parochial. People fall in love with their particular area of expertise, and tend to not appreciate as much as they should other people's areas of expertise,
Yeah.
and how you bring that to bear to build a team, to complete a project, to be successful in what you're trying to achieve in the end state.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's flip this on its head. What's something that people get
Okay.
wrong about being a good leader? What's a misconception out there?
Yeah. Well, let me give you an underlying premise, and I think the key to good leadership is living by a set of core values. Um, and so, if you recall from San Antonio, I shared some core values and character traits that I thought were really important:
Mm-hmm.
integrity, competency, self-discipline, personal courage, selflessness, humility, and here's one: accountability. And so, if to answer your question of how do leaders get off track, what are the mistakes they make, is if they deviate from their set of core values. And I will tell you, on the hierarchy of those 7 values, the first one and most important one is integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you stray from your core values, when you violate your integrity, that's probably the biggest mistake that a leader can ever make. Because once you've violated your integrity, it's very hard to go back and regain that, in the eyes of your colleagues, but more importantly, in the eyes of your subordinates, that are looking to you for leadership.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
the mistakes you make is, if you don't stay true to your core values. I think another mistake that leaders make is they lose situational awareness. We can go back to the silo discussion. If you are firmly ensconced in your silo, and you don't have situational awareness of what's going on next to you, left and right, forward and backward, if you lose that situational awareness, you lose your effectiveness as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's important, the horizontal integration of leadership across the silos. But situational awareness is really, really important for a leader. You have to know you have to know where you are. You have to know what is happening to your organization. More importantly, you have to know what's not happening inside your organization. And then you've got to have the self reflection to know what you need to do to get things moving again.
Mm-hmm. So a couple things that kind of
Yeah.
sparked in my mind. First, on
Okay.
the values, going back there,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
love that you centered it around values and not the person with the fancy title, or
No.
anybody can be a leader by representing these values and pulling people along with you, which
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big call out. I hear a lot of times of like, oh, I can't lead them because I'm not the head of the team. I'm like, well, you can still be a great role model and representative and be a leader and pull people in the direction that they need to go to and be an influencer and have that influence on the direction of things, even without the
It,
title. And in time, that title will
it,
probably come if you do that.
Interesting. You mentioned that. I was with a group of friends last night, and we came together and went to a spring baseball game here in Tampa, where the Yankees hold spring training, and so we were gathering to go to a ball game, and a couple of these guys work in academia, and they have a new president of their organization, and they were ruminating over the fact that the president of the organization is demanding respect from them based on his title and the position he holds within the university.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, hey, what you need to do is you need to remind the president that respect is not given freely. It's something that has to be earned.
Yeah.
Leaders have to earn the respect of their subordinates. Just because you have the title of president, you have the title of CEO, or you have, some big title like general, you expect that people will respect you. And the fact of the matter is they'll respect you based on how you conduct your business, how you adhere to your core values, how you inspire people to be better at what they're doing than what they thought they could be. It's all of those things that leaders have to do, the intangibles that earn respect. And so, just because you got the title doesn't mean you're, and you're the top dog doesn't mean you're really the top dog, because if people don't respect you and they don't look at the competency you have, you're doomed to failure.
Right. Yeah, more than agree. One of the other areas that I wanted to dive into, you mentioned, I forget the exact words that you used, but you mentioned on having to have kind of that big picture, but also know what is, and more importantly, what is not happening in the organization. Mm-hmm. How does a leader, especially kind of a vision casting leader, focus more on the strategy? How do they maintain the balance of strategy and really pushing that vision, and also kind of going into the weeds and knowing where things are?
Yeah, let me give you an example. You may remember this from the discussion I had with you all in San Antonio on situational awareness. I go back to my example of Colonel Hal Moore and the 3rd Squadron, 7th Cavalry in the Battle of Ia Drang Valley, Vietnam, November 15th, 1965. Hal Moore was the squadron commander. He was the guy in charge of that organization, about 480 troopers that he took into the Ia Drang Valley. They got to Ia Drang. The intelligence guys had significantly underestimated the strength of the North Vietnamese that they were fighting there, and so they were outnumbered about 5-1. What happened was Hal Moore's troopers were fighting and dying. Hal Moore was up on the line with them. Very intense fight and a very pitched battle. Hal Moore had the wherewithal to physically extract himself off of the line, and he went behind a large anthill, and he asked himself several questions. What's happening? What's not happening? What should be happening? And what am I doing about it? And so from the tactical standpoint, in the middle of the fight, to withdraw and look at it objectively, look at it strategically, is the responsibility of a leader. And you have to have that wherewithal to know things aren't going real good right now. Why is that? What's not happening? What is happening, what's not happening, but more importantly, what needs to be happening. And then the $65 question is what the heck am I doing about it? And so after Hal Moore answered those questions, he knew that he needed more artillery, he needed more medevac, he needed more close air support, he needed more ammunition. And he got on the radio and started talking and getting those things that he needed that ultimately, Todd, turned the tide of the battle. It would have ended poorly had Hal Moore not extracted himself out. So the leader has to have the wherewithal to understand the situation, to have the situational awareness, and then take a step back and say, okay, I got to fix this stuff really fast. And that's the mark of a really, really good leader that can do that. And it can be in business as well. Okay, if you're tanking, if your P&L line is tanking, and you got people bailing out of your company, and you're losing investment. You're not completing projects and stuff according to your timelines. The leader has to say, "What's happening here?
Mm-hmm.
What's not happening? What needs to be happening? How am I going to fix it?" So it's readily transferable over to business when things aren't going so well, and it takes self-reflection of a leader to turn the tide.
Yeah. What I like about that example too is that Hal Moore was engaged in the fight to begin with. He was not
Yeah,
afraid to get his hands dirty.
yeah,
Step one, but then he
yeah.
had the wherewithal, as you said, to step back. And I think both of those skills are very needed in a leader, to know when to engage, when to get your hands dirty,
Mm-hmm.
when to be on that front line, and then when to
Mm-hmm.
step back and kind of pick your head up and see the bigger picture of what's happening as well.
It was interesting, and it goes back to culture and leadership and preparing your team. When Hal Moore took his 480 troopers into LZ X-ray in the Yadrang Valley, he told them, he said, "If you trust me, if you believe in me, and if you listen to what I'm asking and telling you to do, I will bring you all home." That's a pretty significant statement to make for guys that are going into combat where there's a high probability that you could be wounded and or killed in action.
Mm-hmm.
But Hal Moore, from the very beginning, said, "I will bring you back." He was the first one off of the helicopters into the LZ, and he was the last man off of the LZ when they departed several days later. They did lose 80 soldiers killed in action. And one of the things that he told me was, "My greatest regret is I didn't bring them all home alive." I said, "But you brought them all home, and you brought them back to their family. Those 80 guys that were killed in action, you brought them back." And he said, well, that was my promise to them, and I had to keep that promise as a leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, he was in the fray. He was first in, last out, and right in the middle of it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's what good leaders do.
Absolutely. Pivoting a bit, kind of going
Yeah.
back to your story, how
Mm-hmm.
have you been able to adapt your leadership style to keep up with the different generations, different personalities that come and go on your team?
Yeah, boy, that's a really good question, because I was in the Army for a really long time, um, and so the if nothing else, the explosion of technology around us from 1973 when I enlisted to 2013 when I retired, the explosion of technology that was provided to soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines to do what we do. So the first thing you have to do is one, you have to realize that things are changing around you. You have to become competent on all of the new emerging technology in order to be able to understand it, employ it, and make and leverage the fight for you. So it's an educational process. And one of the things that the services do, all of them, is we have very deliberate programs for professional military education that keeps us abreast of what is coming, the technologies that are out there, and how to apply them. Now, the next part of it gets really interesting, because I'm a boomer, okay, and so after the baby boomers came Gen Z, Gen X,
We can just skip over them. Everybody
millennials.
forgets about them anyway.
Yeah. But you have to understand what motivates a boomer is different than what motivates a millennial or a Gen Zer. And so, how do you communicate with them? How do they communicate with you? Do you understand what they're saying to you? Not that we speak different languages, but we have different colloquial terms that we get comfortable with based on our generation. And so, one of the key leadership tips is leaders have to be effective communicators. in both verbal and written communication. So you have to be able to write and speak so that people understand you. And that's very key. And understanding what's important to different generational groups of soldiers or different generational groups of business people is really important.
Mm-hmm.
You go to MEP Force, and you got all the young entrepreneurial Gen Z millennials that are zigging and zagging and multitasking and real comfortable with technology. And then, a couple of dinosaurs like me wander through, and we're trying to figure out, what exactly is the technology that you're using. So one of the keys to being confident, being effective as a leader is you have to be educated, and you got to spend a lot of time studying your profession, and you got to spend a lot of time studying the tools of your profession that allow you to be effective and allow you to employ those things. I'll not forget the first time that I met a GPS device. It was during the first Gulf War, 1990, 1991, and the GPS was just evolving, and so they handed me this box, and it was a Gen 1 GPS device. It's like, you got to be kidding me! How does this work? Well, we were in Saudi Arabia, and we were out in the middle of a desert where it hadn't been mapped. There was a map, but there were no terrain features. It was just a white sheet of paper, because it's hard to map a desert.
Yeah.
And so the question is, well, how the hell do you know where you're at? And they said, well, turn on your little box and it'll tell you where you're at. And so in 1990, 1991, we had to learn how to use GPS devices to navigate and communicate where we were, but more importantly, to communicate when we needed something like close air support or artillery or those sorts of things. And so, fortunately, it was we had some training time to get used to it, but this influx of technology was new to us. Now you go into the fight, and the fact that you would not go with a GPS or some sort of a positioning system is unconscionable. Okay. We wouldn't think of going anywhere without having that technology with us. And so, technology evolves, and we as leaders, we as soldiers, we as businessmen have to evolve with the technology. And I think, we saw a lot of that at MEP Force in San Antonio, with what the electrical engineers were doing, what the mechanical engineers were doing, what the plumbers were doing. Technology that didn't exist 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. And the youngsters are employing it like it's second nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
that makes sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it reminds me of a great story that you told. And I love this period in history, but it's of Ernest Shackleton's Antarctica expedition with the Endurance. I think one of the things that he did so well was he was highly aware of his situation and was able to pull from his training and his education and adapt in real time to the craziness going on around him, and the personality breakdowns and hysterics that I'm sure had to be happening when you're trapped in the middle of Antarctica.
Well, Shackleton is a wonderful story. It is a story of leadership. It is a story of leading by example. It is human hardship. It is leading men in extreme, harsh conditions, and keeping them all alive. It was interesting when Shackleton organized his expedition. He put the sign out on the door that said, "Men wanted for dangerous mission. Dark, harsh conditions. Probability of success very low. Probability of death very high. Apply within." And there were 27 and there were 20 there were 27 guys. There were 27 guys that knocked on the door and says, "I want to do that." And then there was the one guy that stowed away on the ship that said, "That was probably the worst decision I ever made in my life." But there were 28 men on the Endurance when they went to Antarctica, And of course, the story, if it's a fascinating one, but the Endurance got caught in the ice, and the ice crushed the wooden ship, and Shackleton and his 28 guys lived on the Antarctic ice shelf for 2 years. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, people complain about being in New York during the wintertime, how cold it is. I mean, imagine living in Antarctica out in the open.
Yeah, over 100 years ago with that.
And it was, and the thing was is no one came for them because, one, no one knew they were there, and two, no one cared because the First World War had just broken out, and so they were all focused on stuff going on in Europe, and no one cared about Shackleton and his crew except Shackleton. Mm-hmm. And he picked the 6 best guys. They drugged their lifeboats across the ice, and he left 22 guys at Elephant Island. And he and 5 other guys got into an open lifeboat and went 800 miles across the ocean in the winter to get help. And it took Shackleton 128 days to organize a rescue party to go back to Elephant Island and pick up his 22 guys. And when he pulled into the harbor with the rescue team, the 22 guys saw the boat coming, and they said, "Shackleton has come back to save us because he said he would. No one would do that but Shackleton."
Yeah. It's an amazing story. So we're 110 years since that time. What can we take as far as leadership lessons and bring it into the modern day context?
One, you have to be committed to the value set you live with. It would have been very easy for Shackleton to save himself and the other guys and forget about the guys on Elephant Island. But he didn't. And so the first lesson of that is commitment to your team. Mm-hmm. Commitment to your team as a leader. I'm going to come back and save them. It's like Hal Moore. I'm going to bring you all back. I'm going to be the last man off the LZ. So Shackleton said, I'm going to do this. And the extreme hardship. I mean, these are hard men, Todd. Holy moly! In an open lifeboat, 800 miles across the Antarctic Ocean in the wintertime.
It sounds terrible to me.
No. Look, I'm a huge wimp. I'd have never survived. I'd have died. I'd have died of exposure. But it's that drive. That code of conduct, that ethos that you build within a team. And Shackleton says, "I'm coming back to get them." And he told all 22 of those guys on Elephant Island, "I'm coming back to get you." And they believed him, and he did it. And so, that's a story of endurance that transcends time. Obviously very harsh conditions, and things would be a lot different in 2023 if you were running a rescue mission. But it was commitment to the team. It was the promise that I'm going to take care of you. I'm your leader. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to bring you all back. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing that transcends into business. We're going to do this together. We're going to be successful. When things get tough, I'm going to step up and I'm going to help you. And we as a team are going to succeed. We as a team are going to survive.
Mm-hmm. So one of our kind of main currents, if you will, of the show is around innovation. And I mm-hmm. think Shackleton was very innovative throughout his entire adventure down in Antarctica. But what does that mean to you?
Innovation means that you've got to take the situation you have and figure out how to be successful. Figure out how to be successful in spite of the hardship, in spite of the environmental circumstances. You have got to press on. Imagine what Shackleton thought when the ice crushed the Endurance and it sank. They were doing kind of sort of okay when the ship was still there and they could live inside the ship, and they they had some heat and they were out of the elements and all of that. But when the ice crushed the ship, it's like, holy cow! Now what are we going to do? And so he innovated by taking stuff off of the ship. What are we going to need to survive on the ice shelf? So they took the canvas from the sails, and they took the lifeboats, and they took the provisions, and they got all this stuff off. Because he knew what was going to happen to the ship. So he used innovation to salvage as much as he possibly could from that ship to allow them to sustain themselves on the ice. And then using the lifeboats as wagons, if you will, and placing rollers out, and then they roll the lifeboats across the ice, and then to take the best of the lifeboats and innovate so that 6 guys could get in it and make a trip across the ocean. It's a master example of innovation to survive, not just to be successful. And so, if you take that into business now, you look at technology that's evolving around us. Technology is happening so fast. Look at AI. This whole notion of artificial intelligence. Well, how do guys like me, that's been around for a long time, that grew up in an analog world. I'm a digital immigrant from the analog world to the digital world. So I've had to innovate. How I do business. I think I showed this. I think I took this to San Antonio. You remember me pulling this out?
Yeah.
You go to the workshop. This is my slide rule. This was my computer for my freshman year at the military academy in a math and engineering program. Okay. Contrast it to this, which is my iPhone. A
little bit different.
Look at the capabilities. You tell me, how do you innovate from this to this? That's what you got to do as a leader. Okay.
Yeah.
And so how do you accommodate artificial intelligence? How do you accommodate unmanned platforms? How do you accommodate computer-driven programs for mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, plumbing? All of the technology that's been infused is all function of innovation by practitioners, but also innovation by leaders to understand what the hell is it that we've got our hands on here, and how does it help us do our job better?
Yeah.
And the thing, and the interesting thing is, where the Gen Zers are so valuable is if we can't figure this stuff out, you give it to a Gen Zer, or better yet, give it to one of your grandkids and let them sort it out for you. But I got a real kick out of watching the young Gen Zs at MEP Force that had all of that kit out there that were explaining to the more mature members of the conference, how all this stuff came together. I got a real kick out of it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, how do people find out more information on what you're doing and connect with you?
I had a website. I took it down because I spend a lot of time. So I've best way to reach out to me is via email. KNHorst HORST1978 @gmail.com. If you send me an email, I'll answer you. In fact, while we were talking here, the phone was ringing. Remember Aggie Matt from remember Matt the Aggie?
Yep.
Remember Matt the Aggie that I dimed out?
That's right. Yeah. You got a good call.
He was just calling me.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm at a stage in life where I was doing LinkedIn, and I had a website, and I had a bunch of stuff, and it's like, I'm throttling back a little bit. I'm in the pay it forward stage of life right now, and so I try to help people out. I wrote Common Sense Leadership. I don't sell it. Send me an email and I'll send you a copy of it. It's Common Sense Leadership, my 10 leadership tips from a time in the Army. But yeah, just send me an email or send me a text message, and if you do, I'll respond.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, final question for you. If I could give
Yes,
you
sir.
all power to innovate one thing at the snap of your fingers, what would you choose to innovate?
If I had one thing to innovate, I think that I think there's huge potential in artificial intelligence. But I think we have to be very careful about how we set the parameters and how we set the algorithms for artificial intelligence. I think in business, I think in mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, that AI is huge. I think in production engineering, AI is huge. I think in the Department of Defense, unmanned platforms is huge. So I would spend a lot of time looking at artificial intelligence, not as a competitor, but as an enabler and as a tool to help us be better. And I think, a lot of people say, well, that AI is going to put us all of we carbon life forms out of business because they're going to take over. And I said, I don't think that's the case, because there's a human dimension that AI can't capture, and that's called emotion. It's called adrenaline. AI doesn't have emotion. AI doesn't take risk because it's not programmed to take risk. Whereas guys like you and I are willing to take risk to help people, to take care of people, like Shackleton was willing to take risk. The human dimension in my mind will always reign supreme. We just need to be able to integrate the technology that we have to help us be better leaders, to help us be better humans.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Agree with that for sure with AI. Well, General Horst, thanks so much.
There's some scary stuff.
Yeah.
There's some scary stuff when they put AI into an F-16 and then they fly it against a carbon life form pilot in the cockpit of an F-16. You know who won?
Who won? The person?
The pilot.
Nice.
The pilot. The pilot beat AI.
Yeah.
You know why?
Because it's Maverick.
Because he's Maverick. And when you get into the cockpit and you get that endorphin rush and you get that adrenaline rush of flying that airplane, AI doesn't feel that shit. They don't feel it. Okay. And so it just flies the profile that's been given. You and I will go into the danger zone, okay, to be successful.
I like that tie back in. It was very nicely done. Thanks so much for taking the time and joining us. This was awesome. There's so much more that we could dive into. We'll have to have you back to dive into those, but really appreciate it.
Todd, thanks. Yeah, thanks so much for reaching out to me. Thanks for the opportunity to do this. Thanks to be able to spend a little bit of time with you again. I thoroughly enjoyed our time together in San Antonio, and I hope that somewhere down the road that you call me and I'll bring my slide rule and
it's a deal.
help you guys innovate.